Hello, people. It's Perky Perkins back with another sci-fi short story. Welcome, fellow travelers in space and time, to another story from beyond the known world. The title of this story is Botanica. Morton Meek had worked hard all his life. He was looking forward to a well-deserved vacation. He contacted Everyman's Guide to the Galaxy Travel Agency. There he met Mr. Everyman. Mr. Everyman pulled up some travel sites off the computer. He said, "How about a time travel vacation? Some people like to visit the Mesozoic era. It's full of big dinosaurs." Morton said, "It sounds dangerous." Mr. Everyman pulled up another site and said, "How about a cyberspace vacation? You don't even have to go anywhere. You just put on a headset and you're there in virtual reality." Morton Meek said, "I'd rather go there in person." Mr. Everyman took a deep breath and pulled up another site. He said, "How about a trip to the Happiness Isles?" The Happiness Isles are located in Quadrant 5 sector. It says here that the Happiness Isles are full of wine, women, and song. It's a little expensive. It's 200 credits for 2 weeks. Morton said, "I'm looking for something a little more relaxing. I've worked hard all my life. I'm looking for something where I can just sit back and relax." Mr. Everyman pulled up another site and said, "Aha, I found it. I have the perfect place for you. You're going to love it. How about a trip to Botanica? Beautiful flowers and plenty of sunshine. It says here that breakfast practically falls off the trees. You won't have to worry about life support systems. Gravity, temperature, and atmosphere are very similar to your home planet. According to the guide, it's a planet of plant eaters, and it's not nearly as expensive as the Happiness Isles. It's only 100 credits for 2 weeks. Morton said, "That sounds ideal. I'll try it for 2 weeks, and then be back for more if I like it." The next day, Morton Meek boarded the Airbus for Botanica. The Airbus sailed past the moons of Matria and through the asteroid belt. Soon the planet of Botanica came into view. He heard the conductor say, "Next stop, Botanica." The Airbus set gently down on the planet of Botanica. It was just like the guide said. Beautiful flowering plants and tree-lined walkways, and plenty of sunshine. He could hardly wait to relax. The planet was so beautiful. He cut across the grass heading for a tree-lined walkway. But as he did, he heard a voice say, "Keep off the grass! Keep off the grass!" Morton stopped in his tracks. He said to himself, "Am I hearing things? I thought I just heard somebody say keep off the grass." He paused and then continued on his way. He settled down again and whistled as he walked down the tree-lined walkway. He was looking forward to a nice, relaxing vacation. The walkway was lined with beautiful flowers of all kinds. There were violets and daisies and daffodils and many other beautiful flowers of all colors and hues. Further along, he spotted a beautiful rose bush. Morton Meek said to himself, "Surely no one would mind if I picked just one flower." Morton reached over to pick one flower, but the flower seemed to reach out at him. The flower stuck him in the finger, and at the same time he heard a voice say, "Do not pick the flowers. Do not pick the flowers." Morton Meek lurched back in surprise and shook his painful finger. He looked down at his bloody finger and said, "Did somebody just tell me not to pick the flowers?" He took a small handkerchief from his satchel and wiped off his bloody finger. He continued down the walkway in a cautious manner. At the end of the walkway, he saw a beautiful orange tree. He remembered what the guide said, that breakfast practically falls off the trees. He reached up eagerly to pick off the biggest, juiciest orange he could see. But suddenly he heard a voice say, "Do not pick the fruit. Under penalty of law, do not pick the fruit." Morton shrunk back in frustration and said, "Did someone just tell me not to pick the fruit? I must be hearing things." Morton continued cautiously down another walkway, puzzling to himself over the series of events that had just occurred. He began to wonder what kind of place Botanica really was. All he ever really wanted was a little rest and relaxation. Soon he came to a beautiful shade tree that was overhanging the walkway. As he passed under the tree, a large vine swung down from a lower branch of the tree. The vine appeared to try and wrap itself around Morton Meek's neck. He ducked low and crouched under the vine. He said, "Was that vine trying to strangle me?" He gathered himself together and continued down the walkway. Further down the walkway, he began to pick up the aroma of a beautiful plant. There by the side of the walkway was a beautiful green and purple plant. He could smell the intoxicating aroma coming from the plant. He stopped and bent over tentatively to smell the aroma coming from the plant. Suddenly, the mouth of the plant opened wide and two large tendrils reached out to grab him. Morton swung his satchel at the plant and ducked back just in time. He said, "That plant was trying to grab me. What kind of place is this? All I ever really wanted was a little rest and relaxation." Then suddenly he heard a whirring sound behind him. In the distance, he could see some kind of motorized platform approaching him. As the vehicle drew closer, he could see two people standing on the platform. But as he looked more closely, it looked more like two giant sunflowers up on the platform. Suddenly he heard a voice say, "Halt! Halt in the name of the law!" Morton Meek froze in his tracks. He said out loud, "What have I done? What have I done?" The taller of the two sunflowers, with a sergeant's badge pinned to one of his leaves, said, "You were warned not to step on the grass." Morton Meek said, "I didn't know. I wasn't supposed to step on the grass. I didn't see any signs." Sergeant Sunflower said, "Ignorance of the law is no excuse. You were also seen trying to pick a rose from a rose bush. A rose is most beautiful when it is on the bush. For you to satisfy your own selfish desires by picking the rose from the bush means death to the rose." Morton Meek said, "I'm sorry. I should have known better. You're right. A rose is most beautiful when it is on the bush. I should have known better." Sergeant Sunflower continued, "You were also seen trying to pick an orange from a tree. You were told by the orange not to pick the fruit, yet you deliberately disobeyed his command. The grass told you to stay off, and the rose and the orange bush told you to leave them alone. Orange tree told you to leave them alone. But you wouldn't listen." Morton said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I only wanted a peaceful, relaxing vacation. The guide said that breakfast practically falls off the trees on Botanica." Sergeant Sunflower said, "You should have read the fine print. Breakfast practically falls off the trees, but not quite." Morton said to himself, "What have I gotten myself into? Flowers that walk and talk. What kind of place is this anyway?" Then Morton recalled that sometime in the late 20th century, man had learned to split the DNA molecule. This gave rise to many transgenic species, half man and half animal, or half man and half plant. Thus, walking and talking plants, half human and half plant man. Sergeant Sunflower said, "I'm serving you a citation for disobeying our laws. You are to come with us." The next thing Morton Meek knew, he was in a courtroom to account for his actions. The courtroom was packed with flowers and plants of all kinds. There were fruits and vegetables and even a few trees who had to bend their heads to get into the courtroom. There was a rumor that there were even some bacteria in the courtroom, but they were too small to be seen. The sound of sobbing could be heard from the back of the courtroom. At first, Morton thought that someone might be concerned about his plight, but it turned out to be only Miss Weeping Willow, who could cry at the drop of a leaf. The jury filed in one by one. Miss Venus Flytrap came first. Morton recognized her immediately as the plant who had tried to grab him on the walkway. He knew he was in trouble when he heard Miss Flytrap say, "They're always eating us. Now it's our turn to eat them." Then came the strangling vine, who had also attacked him on the walkway. The vine was followed by a cute little tomato. The vine tried to wrap himself around her, but she fought him off. She said, "What do you think I am, a vegetable or something?" Then came Mr. Cactus. The other plants stayed away from him as much as possible. Then came Miss Narcissus. She was always busy putting on her makeup. Mr. Pansy was next. He kept insisting he was not a sissy. Then Miss Violet, another lovely young lady. Miss Violet was followed by Miss Touch-Me-Not, who kept insisting that people not crowd her in. Miss Crabapple was next. She was always arguing with everyone else. Miss Primrose, Miss Belladonna, and Mr. Dandelion brought up the rear. Miss Primrose always thought of herself as better than everyone else. She didn't want to hear any bad language, and she couldn't stand Mr. Dandelion. She thought he was just a common weed. Mr. Dandelion said he was just as good as anybody else. Miss Belladonna asked people to just call her Bella, but the other plants didn't trust her because she was poisonous. Mr. Sequoia had been impaneled on the jury, but he was excused because he was too big to fit into the building. He had to wait outside. Everyone knew when he arrived the ground shook like an earthquake. After the jury was sworn in, the judge entered the courtroom. The bailiff said, "All rise for the Honorable John J. Jack in the pulpit." Everyone stood up until the judge sat down. Then the bailiff said, "Be seated." A rustling of leaves could be heard throughout the courtroom. Then the bailiff said, "Your Honor, the next case on the docket is Meek versus the planet of Botanica." The prosecutor spoke first. Prosecutor Snapdragon said, "Your Honor, I have sworn testimony from several pieces of grass that the defendant purposely stepped on them on his way to the walkway. Furthermore, one of our rose bushes said he purposely tried to pick a rose from her rose bush. And then he tried to pick an orange from one of our orange trees. He was told not to pick the fruit, but he wouldn't listen." The judge said, "What do you have to say for yourself, Mr. Meek?" Beads of sweat poured out on Morton's brow as he tried to account for his actions. He said, "Your Honor, I only came here for a little rest and relaxation. I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. I didn't see any sign that said keep off the grass, and I didn't see any sign that said don't pick the flowers or the fruit." Prosecutor Snapdragon said, "Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Humans have always taken advantage of us. They use us for food, clothing, and shelter. We don't need them. They have no use to us." Once again, the rustling of leaves filled the courtroom. Several plants began clapping their leaves together. The Honorable John J. Jack in the pulpit slammed down his gavel and said, "Order! Order in the court!" Morton Meek said to himself, "How did I ever get into this mess? All I ever wanted was a nice quiet vacation." Then Morton got a bright idea. He said, "Your Honor, the prosecutor says human beings are not necessary for the survival of the plant world. This is not true. Human beings are good for the plant world." He said, "The prosecutor said human beings are the enemy of the plant world. This also is not true. What about horticulture and greenhouses and gardening? We protect plants from harmful insects. We protect plants from harmful insects and animals. We are friends of the plant world." Then Morton slammed down his fist on the table, and his face turned beet red with conviction. He said, "More importantly, I submit to you, members of the jury, plants could not survive without the help of human beings. Human beings are truly necessary for the survival of the plant world. Plants give off oxygen into the air that is needed by human beings. In exchange, we human beings give off carbon dioxide, which is necessary for plants to survive. So you see, members of the jury, you need us as much as we need you." Once again, the rustle of leaves filled the courtroom. Several plants began to clap their hands together again. The jury paused and mulled over what Morton Meek had said. They began to nod their petals and leaves in agreement with what Morton Meek had to say. Even Miss Flytrap appeared to be nodding in the affirmative. Finally, the foreman of the jury stood up and said, "Your Honor, the jury agrees that the defendant serves a useful purpose. We find the defendant not guilty of all charges." Judge Jack in the pulpit slammed in his gavel once again and said, "Case dismissed. This court is adjourned. The defendant is free to leave." Morton wiped his brow and prepared for his trip back home. The next day, the airbus arrived right on time. Morton boarded the bus and waved a thankful goodbye to Planet Botanica. As soon as he arrived back home, he said he paid a trip to Everyman's Guide to the Galaxy travel agency. Morton said to Mr. Everyman, "I thought you said Botanica was a planet of plant eaters, and that breakfast practically fell off the trees." Mr. Everyman said, "Well, it was a planet of plant eaters, and breakfast did practically fall off the trees. I didn't know it was the plants that were going to do the eating." After Mr. Everyman heard the rest of Morton's story, he cheerfully refunded his money and wished him well on his next adventure. Morton said to himself, "All I ever wanted was a little rest and relaxation. Next time I think I'll try virtual reality. You don't even have to go there." Well, that's the story for today, people. I'll see you all a little later on.